Welcome to True Spies, the podcast that takes you deep inside the greatest secret missions of all time.
Suddenly, out of the darkness appeared Bin Laden.
You'll meet the people who live life undercover. What do they know? What are their skills? And what would you do in their position?
Vengeance felt good. Seeing these people pay for what they'd done felt righteous.
True Spies from Spyscape Studios, wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, this is Matt from the Explorers Podcast. I want to invite you to join me on the voyages and journeys of the most famous explorers in the history of the world. These are the thrilling and captivating stories of Magellan, Shackleton, Lewis and Clark, and so many other famous and not so famous adventurers from throughout history. Go to explorerspodcast.com or just look us up on your podcast app. That's the Explorers Podcast.
Hey everyone, Ray here. One last time for the seats in the back. You already know of the incredible Dunkirk civilian mobilization during World War II and what it took to pull that off. But there's another remarkable story of a civilian-led maritime operation where Denmark ferried thousands of their Jewish citizens to safety in a mass-scale rescue right under the noses of the Nazis. From award-winning author Tim Brady, A Light in the Northern Sea, Denmark's incredible rescue of their Jewish citizens during World War II meticulously explores this nationwide resistance movement that reads like a thriller. Denmark's nearly 8,000 Jews survived, but it wasn't a miracle. It was the combined achievement of a nation refusing to stand by, using clever subterfuge and increasingly daring acts of sabotage. Among the rescued was Niels Bohr, the world-famous nuclear physicist who went on to help Oppenheimer build the bomb at Los Alamos. Publishers Weekly calls this book illuminating, an inspiring and suspenseful history that showcases grassroots efforts to stand up to tyranny. A Light in the Northern Sea from Kensington Books is available everywhere books are sold, and you can learn more at tim-brady.com. Hello, and thank you for listening to The History of World War II podcast, episode 558, Of All the Gin Joints in the World. As Operation Torch was being planned, the American people, knowing nothing of this, were restless. Most were asking, right alongside Stalin, where's the second front? From Charlie Chaplin to Wendell Willkie, the Republican candidate back in 1940, were pleading for Washington to do something. They just had to keep a tight lid on it, lest the enemy should find out, and prepare. As war correspondent Alan Morris had described America at this moment, spending time between New York and Washington as he was about to be shipped out to North Africa, America was discontent and uncertain, not unlike a young soldier that was about to go over the top. But not yet. He still had time to imagine all the things that could go wrong, that this would never end. But then, the whistle is blown, he springs forth, and action takes over his body. There's no more time for thinking, only doing. Well, on the morning of November 8th, all those questions, concerns, and doubts that the American people had came to an end when the radios and newspapers exploded with the news that American troops under General Eisenhower had landed in North Africa. Not for the first time, nor the last, Americans were glued to whatever radio was closest to them. As for the American people, well, most of them, all was forgiven. Good for FDR, good for the State Department, good for our boys, as the first two had been riddled with questions for months. When are we getting stuck in? Why do we still have relations with Vichy? Don't they have relations with Germany? Still, Alan Moorhead was confused by the whiplash of the American people. How could they go from dread to elation? Did they not understand the suffering their boys were about to go through? But then he understood that the Yanks did not know what they did not know. The learning curve was coming. It always comes. Coming at French Morocco was Western Task Force of 33,843 Americans, being transported and protected by just over 100 ships, including carriers, the battleship USS Massachusetts, cruisers, destroyers, and support craft, oilers, and hospital ships. Though, if the work the U.S. State Department had put in since Vichy was created did any good, the hospital facilities within the Western Task Force would not be needed. As the entire French territory needed to be subdued, the task force would break apart when near land and come ashore at 3 different places. In overall command was Major General George S. Patton, Jr. The naval commander was Rear Admiral Henry K. Hewitt, aboard the heavy cruiser USS Augusta. Like the other 2 task forces, there would be multiple landings. 1, to stop the enemy from delaying defeat by engaging a single force, and 2, to close in on Casablanca from 2 sides, so the Vichy powers that be could not retreat further inland. The main landing, using up most of Patton's infantry, would make landfall 18 miles or 29 kilometers north of Casablanca at Fadala, as that city would be shielded by French troops, but not as many as were at the capital, Casablanca. This landing also threatened Rabat to the north, another major city that will become the capital after the war. A second landing would take place further north, about 90 miles north at Medea Port Ute, for that had an all-weather airfield. The third and last landing would take place 140 miles or 225 kilometers south of Casablanca at Safi. The main reason for this was that Patton's 55 M4 Shermans were too big for tank lighters, but as Safi had a deep water harbor, there it was possible to offload them. So there it would be. Given the fact that French Morocco was just off the Atlantic, the French highly valued it, as its defenses showed. Defending French Morocco as a whole were 4 divisions, along with coastal and air defenses, all told, about 55,000 troops, along with 120 tanks and 80 armored cars. As for the French air arm, there would be 40 DW-250 and 46 Hawk 75 fighters, with 30 French medium bombers and 26 Douglas A-20 Havoc light bombers, ordered from the United States. And as for the eyes in the sky, the French would have 13 Po 63.11 reconnaissance aircraft spread throughout the country. Of course, the million-dollar question was, would the French resist or not? Lord knows that all the ways to pressure a government or persons had been tried, including cash. Still, it was best to have their ducks in a row, so the Americans, if fired upon, would send out the phrase, "batter up," and if permission was given to fire back, Task Force 34's command reply would be, "play ball." Matching this light-hearted approach, as for the ground troops once ashore, their call and response would be the following. They would call out, "George." The correct response had better be, "Patton." It would be Force Brushwood, or the Center Attack Group, that would land at Fadala, commanded by Major General Jonathan W. Anderson, with Rear Admiral Lyle A. Davidson in charge of the naval component. Under Anderson were men from the 3rd Infantry Division, the 7th and 15th Regiments, supported by the 756th Tank Battalion. Waiting for them was Fadala's defenses, the battery du Pont Blandon, which had 3 138mm M1910 guns about 3 miles up the coast. The battery du Fadala itself with 3 100mm M1910s and 2 75mm guns being placed hard upon the city, just to the northwest and north at the end of the peninsula. Once past these guns, there were still 3 Renault FT light tanks and 100 Senegalese troops of the Coastal Defense Company and the 53rd AA Defense Unit with 4 105mm guns.
Did you know ancient Romans used to brush their teeth with urine?
Or that there's a medieval recipe for exploding soup.
Or that in the 19th century London, people held seances to talk to ghosts inside their plumbing?
That's the kind of weird crap you might hear on the Box of Oddities podcast.
But now we're hitting the road to do live shows.
Nobody asked us to, but we're doing it anyway.
We're Kat and Jethro.
Join us for an unforgettable evening of strange stories, twisted trivia, and deeply unnecessary research.
The Box of Oddities. It's Alive 2025 Fall Tour.
It's like history gets drunk and tells you its secrets.
We're coming to Seattle,
Portland,
OKC,
Atlanta,
Philadelphia,
Appleton, Wisconsin,
Louisville, Kentucky,
and Chicago, Illinois Halloween night.
Get your tickets at theboxofoddities.com.
Again, that's theboxofoddities.com.
Because if history can repeat itself, so can we.
That's theboxofoddities.com.
All right, that's enough.
Meanwhile, just to the southwest, at Casablanca itself, there was the impressive battery at El Hank, which had 4 194mm M1902 guns and 4 138mm M1910s. This battery was on a promontory just northwest of the city. Added to this were 2 more smaller batteries, one to the northeast of Casablanca, near the shoreline, and the other on the city's eastern edge, to landward. But hoping to negate these powerful French guns at Casablanca and the Fadala area were the aircraft aboard the carrier Ranger and the auxiliary carrier Suwannee, which had 77 F-4F Wildcats, 27 Dauntlesses, and TBF Avengers, as well as the guns of the heavy cruiser Augustus, light cruiser Brooklyn, and 4 destroyers. It was time. As darkness came on November 7th, the Center Attack Group took up station, 6 miles offshore. On board the 12 transports and 3 cargo ships were 19,870 U.S. Army troops, 1,701 vehicles, and 15,000 tons of supplies. The first 4 transports to go in were carrying 4 Battalion Landing Teams, or BLTSs, BLT 1-7, BLT 2-7, BLT 1-30, and BLT 2-30. Yet each landing team needed just over 40 LCPRs, landing craft vehicle personnel, or Higgins boats, and 9 LCVs, landing craft mechanized. Thus, this was going to take a while, and that made it dangerous. With each battalion, there was a control destroyer parked about 400 yards offshore, watching over them as they moved in. The BLTs were to have come ashore at 4 a.m., but there had been a delay. Was this an ominous sign, or just normal Murphy's Law? It was the former. The tides were intense, pushing the landing craft around like toys. More than a few foundered, and the men, weighed down with equipment, were lost. For the ones that made it ashore, most were not where they were supposed to be, some miles away, but they were on dry land. Jumping ahead for a second, by the time the sun set on this D-Day, 160 of the 347 landing craft would be lost. This would slow down the resupplying of troops and their weapons. Each man coming ashore had to hope that the French would see the pointlessness of fighting back and allow the GIs to come further ashore peacefully. But the coastal batteries would not see it this way, nor would the ships of the French fleet. At 5 a.m., November 8th, the lead U.S. elements had been on Fadala Beach for 5 minutes when the French searchlights came on. The destroyers, again only 4,000 yards away, saw this and opened fire. The lights were either deactivated or permanently deactivated. At 6 a.m., though, dawn came. Suddenly, French machine guns opened up, as did the batteries at Cap Fadala and at Cherki, about 3,500 yards above or to the north of Fadala. This could spell disaster, as most of the Allied men were making landfall in between these two positions. But again, the 4 control destroyers on the spot opened up. Oh, they asked for permission radioing "batter up," but had already started firing. As the saying goes, it is easier to ask for forgiveness than it is permission. At 6:20 a.m., the destroyers Murphy and Ludlow fired at Cherokee, again north of Fadala, while the destroyers Wilkes and Swanson fired at the guns at Cap Fadala. The light cruiser Brooklyn came in and added her 6-inch gun at 6:22. Perhaps overconfident because of this, the Murphy came in closer to the battery Pont Blondin at Cherokee, when the destroyer was hit in its starboard engine room, killing 3, which is when someone gave BLT 2-30 and parts of BLT 2-7 orders to attack that battery. As the men made their way inland, the battery had already been hit by 81mm mortars and shells from the Brooklyn. Battery du Pont Blondin, just off Fadala, surrendered to the GIs at 7:30 a.m. As for the city of Fadala itself, that fell to the men of BLT 1-7 at 6 a.m. And among the civilians was the German Armistice Commission, making sure that Vichy complied with the details of their agreement. Not that BLT 1-7's job was done. After securing the town and the Germans, more on them later, BLT 1-7 would go on to seize the heavy AA battery by 11 a.m. But not to be outdone, when BLT 1-30 came ashore at 7 a.m., they ambushed a train that was just coming into town. Now, they had 75 French POWs to stack up against BLT 1-7's captured battery. Still, in the Fadala area, the Battery du Port opened up on the nearest enemy vessels as the heavy cruiser Augusta exchanged shells with the Battery de Fadala. The American naval guns were trying with all their might to silence those guns still active on shore. To their horror, they received the following radio message at 8:35 a.m. "For Christ's sake, quit firing. You are killing our own troops. This is from Army. You are killing townspeople. No opposition ashore. If you quit firing, they will surrender." The shelling eventually stopped, but the Battery de Fadala was still operational, so a combined armed assault was needed, but soon they silenced its 100mm guns and gave the Americans 22 more prisoners, which left Cap Fadala's 75mm guns and machine gun bunkers dug into the peninsula just north of Fadala. The American infantry were not looking forward to rushing towards that. Fortunately, they did not have to. American mortars and 75mm pack howitzers encouraged those inside to surrender at 3 p.m. The Central Task Force had given the Western Allies a toehold in French Morocco.
From the creators of the popular science show with millions of YouTube subscribers comes the Minute Earth podcast. Every episode of the show dives deep into a science question you might not even know you had. But once you hear the answer, you'll want to share it with everyone you know. Why do rivers curve? Why did the T-Rex have such tiny arms? And why do so many more kids need glasses now than they used to? Spoiler alert, it isn't screen time. Our team of scientists digs into the research and breaks it down into a short, entertaining explanation, jam-packed with science facts and terrible puns. Subscribe to Minute Earth wherever you like to listen.
As for the German Commission Committee, when they were captured, the Americans noticed a lack of anger on their faces. It was more like relief. In time, more was explained. For these Germans, the war was over, and they were still alive, which was a hell of a lot better than being on the Eastern Front. Meanwhile, about 30 miles northwest of Casablanca, carrier USS Ranger, considered too slow for the Pacific, had started launching Wildcats at 6:15 a.m. that morning. Those planes flew up and down the coast, strafing enemy batteries and any, unfortunately, parked aircraft, either at Rabat or Saleh, a bit further to the north. This left the Dauntlesses free to provide air cover for the GIs and, if needed, to dive bomb enemy warships. As will soon happen, the French fleet strove mightily to take out the American naval assets and their planes. Again, jumping ahead, but just for a moment, by the end of the fourth day of these 172 Allied aircraft, they would lose 44. Having launched their fighters and dive bombers, the covering group's battleship Massachusetts, heavy cruisers Wichita and Tuscaloosa, and 4 destroyers turned south, heading for Casablanca at 25 knots. The way Casablanca is laid out, her top edge is spread out due north. To the city's west-northwest is the battery El Hank. Along her northern edge is a port, and there was the battleship Jean Bart, which was moored and had one operational 380 millimeter or 15-inch turret. At 7:01 a.m., when the closest American vessels were now 18,000 yards from El Hank and 20,000 yards from Jean Bart, both opened up. The Massachusetts was rocked by near misses of the guns of El Hank, while the Jean Bart's shots were 600 yards short. That was enough for Rear Admiral Giffen, who then ordered, "Play ball." At 7:04 a.m., the Massachusetts' 16-inch main turret opened fire. This would turn out to be the United States Navy's only Atlantic Fleet action of the entire century, mostly because the Atlantic would become an Allied pond after this war, and by 1943, the U-boat menace had been greatly reduced. But what was about to unfold was the most intense naval combat to an Allied amphibious operation. With play ball announced, the Massachusetts and the Tuscaloosa fired on Jean Bart, due north of the city, leaving Wichita to focus on the El Hank battery to the northwest of Casablanca. The 9 salvos that quickly came from the Massachusetts registered 5 hits. Not bad. The 5th one, at 7:25 a.m., took out the Jean Bart's 1 operational battery. Wichita had been firing on the battery and was joined by the Tuscaloosa after seeing Massachusetts' 5th strike. El Hank's guns went quiet at 7:27 a.m., so the Allied ships went after the city's submarine pen. And though the battery was quiet, that did not stop U.S. naval aircraft from bombing and strafing the harbor, sinking 3 merchantmen and 3 submarines. This had been fast and furious fighting, but mostly one-sided. That was about to change. At 8:15 a.m., Casablanca's Vice Admiral Michelier ordered 7 French destroyers to run up the coast, coming from further south, which would allow these destroyers to evade most of the enemy's surface ships and go right at the landing craft at Fadala. They would soon be joined by 8 French submarines, again coming from the south. Michelier's hope was that, as the destroyers would get there first, the Americans would be too distracted by these to notice, until too late, the coming threat from below. The first French destroyer shell fired and scored a direct hit on a landing craft. Greetings, everyone, from Central Virginia. So, as you can tell, my voice is really bad. So sorry about that. I tried editing and mixing, but it didn't do any good. I am on the tail end of COVID, but I didn't want to go a whole week without putting out a show. So the information's there, the words are there. There's just not a lot of style. Is that the wrong word? Anyway, so I'm sorry I sound like this. I should be better next week. Anyways, I would just like to take a moment and thank some people who have contributed to the show. Let's see here. My latest member who gets anywhere from 3 to 4 episodes a month. And I've just ended the Battle of the Atlantic, and I've started a new series that's not The Spies. I'm going to save that for later, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. I want you to listen to the first episode and see if you can guess what the main subject is, for you members, obviously, before the episode is over. Anyway, so I'm just trying something new, but I found this kind of, to me, obscure story, and so I'm going into it, and just tell me if you figure it out. Anyway, so I don't know why I said all that, but anyway, so the member is Michael Gallagher from Pennsylvania. Thank you very much, Michael, for becoming a member. It's going to be a while because there's 290 episodes in front of you before you get to this, but I hope you figure it out and enjoy it as well. Anyways, as far as those who have donated, let's see here, this Cohen White, Erwin Johnson, who I think is donated before, and the one and only Anthony DeLuca, who has donated several times. So Anthony, Big Tony, thank you very much. It is much appreciated. So we will wrap up Casablanca because there's going to be a big naval clash. I mean, this is going to get ugly. And so we'll cover that, and then they'll solidify these 3 spots, handle the things they have to handle politically, and then boom, it's time to start moving east to Tunisia and to grip Rommel and or his forces in the vice that is the Western Allies. Take care, everyone.